We've got some really interesting Vancouver Canucks related news and some curious Detroit Red Wings news. And we're going to dive into all that here in today's video as we talk about two guys that both are technically connected. Let's take a look at the 2020 NHL Entry Draft, where in the 4th overall spot, the Detroit Red Wings selected Lucas Raymond. 5 picks later, the Minnesota Wild took Marco Rossi. Y'all know the story. Marco Rossi is now a Vancouver Canuck. I thought it was fun to go out there and connect two guys that were, at one point, top prospects in the 2020 NHL Entry Draft, because we have some similar stories in regards to both of these guys in today's updates. So, without further ado, let's start things off by talking about Marco Rossi of the Vancouver Canucks, and some recently revealed info that might actually change the way that a lot of us think about this guy. You see, Marco Rossi is 24 years old. He'll be 25 by the time next season begins. 5'10", 196, a left-handed center. Thank goodness he grew. He is now 5'10". He was like 5'9" for the entirety of that 2020 draft season, and the fact that he was 5'9" is why he ended up going all the way at 9th overall, despite the fact that in this 2020 season, he actually had the most points out of anybody in the CHL, with 120 points in 56 games played. Yeah, never mind the fact that he was the highest producing CHLer in the entire league as a draft eligible, but because he was short, he ended up slipping to 9th overall. A lot of us would say that Marco Rossi actually had a good stint with the Vancouver Canucks. He played with Minnesota last season, getting 60 points in 82 games, and this season he finished with a total of 35 points in 50 games played. A decline, sure. But if you isolate the samples, you can see that Marco Rossi's 22 points in 33 Canucks games was bolstered up pretty heavily by what he had done in the second half of that stint. Not only did Marco Rossi take a while to get adjusted to Vancouver life, I mean, he only had 2 points in his first however many games this is with the Canucks, but he really started to kick things into gear by the time March rolled around. Multi-point games like crazy, a goal and 2 assists, a goal and 2 assists, 2 assists, 2 assists, 1 goal, 1 assist. Marco Rossi was a point-producing machine for the Vancouver Canucks in the second half of the year. But unfortunately, as courtesy of sport.orf.at, we have ourselves some news that Marco Rossi is not going to suit up for Team Austria at the World Championships. Why? Here's why. It's been confirmed since Monday Austria's ice hockey team will not be able to count on support from the NHL at a World Championship for the first time in a long while. Marco Kasper and Marco Rossi had to decline the offer from head coach Roger Bedard on the advice of the team doctors. Both are extremely frustrated. Rossi, who plays for Vancouver, was particularly disappointed to have missed out on playing in the tournament starting on May 15th. Oh boy, let's try to breathe in as we read this out here. A metatarsal fracture suffered in October, and another injury to the same area in the second half of the season, plus his trade from Minnesota to Vancouver, Rossi certainly didn't have a dull year. It was a very exciting season. Also a very demanding one. It certainly wasn't easy, the 24-year-old said in a voice message on Tuesday night. Nevertheless, it pains him to not be able to support the team in Zurich, where Austria will face Great Britain in their first game on May 16th. It's a shame I am not at 100%. It would certainly have been the crowning achievement to also play for the national team. I did spend a lot of my youth there, explained the Vorarlberg native. And all I gotta go out there and say is, wait a minute, what the hell? Marco Rossi was hurt this whole time? The guy was going out there putting up some of the best numbers on the Vancouver Canucks in the second half of the year, and you're telling me he was hurt the entire time? A lot of Canucks fans on the R Canucks subreddit are saying similar things. According to Austrian media, Rossi has been playing with a broken midfoot since October, and he'll now take a break to focus on his recovery. Man, why did the Canucks put him back into the lineup? The season was already shot. He came back for the vibes. Efficient Cash 2070 said. That's brutal for Rossi. Playing on a broken foot that long is wild. Hope he gets a proper reset and comes back 100%. And I also do think that that's a pretty exciting element of this entire thing as well. It's like, oh, Marco Rossi was the most productive Canuck in the second half of the year, in the fourth quarter of the year, essentially, and you're telling me that he was doing all this on a broken midfoot? Okay, well, I can't wait to see what Marco Rossi is able to do when he is not hurt. What is he like when he's fully healthy? Is he a consistent 60-point center who maybe even gets more if he's on number one power play time and a first-line center with Elias Pettersson taking a back seat? This guy could legitimately become that guy that we thought he would be when he was drafted back in 2020 in the NHL Entry Draft. This is a player that had first-line elite potential, and somebody that some scouts were ranking as highly as maybe number 3 in the NHL Draft. So for Marco Rossi, this is a pretty big feather in his cap, and I think a lot of Canucks fans should be excited for that heading into the next few years. Now, let's shift gears over to another guy taken at the top of the 2020 draft, and what Lucas Raymond is up to heading into the World Championships this season. You see, we had an article posted by Bob Duff earlier in the week talking about how Red Wings' Lucas Raymond is uncertain about the World Championships. When it comes to representing his country, Detroit Red Wings forward Lucas Raymond is always amongst the first to answer the call. This year, at least for the time being, he is letting that request go to call waiting. No, to be honest with you, it'll probably be something I address the following week, Raymond said late last week of whether he'd be playing for Sweden at next month's World Championship. I'll be talking with our physios and stuff around us, but also with the Swedish national team. During his career, Raymond has suited up for Sweden 106 times at all levels. He was Sweden's top scorer at the February Olympics, also playing for Sweden in the past 3 World Championship tournaments. Raymond also represented the Swedes at last season's Four Nations face-off. My stance has always been that I love representing my country, and you do it every time you get a chance to do it. I always want to take that opportunity, but there's going to be circumstances where that might not be possible. But yeah, we'll see. If Raymond decides to opt out of playing for Sweden at the tourney, he insists it won't be due to any lingering injury that he had suffered during the season. No, I mean, well, I missed a couple of games early in the year, right? But I felt pretty good from that point. I think coming into the Olympics, my body was good. Obviously, you're going to get bumps and bruises, and you're going to be a little bit banged up, and you got to be able to play through that. I don't think I'm unique in that way. You can just look around our locker room. But yeah, I mean, it's a part of it. That is what it is. And it's kind of funny because some of the comments on this Detroit Red Wings post go out there and spill some of the most interesting takes. This guy said ownership needs to stop letting Red Wings players participate in any non-NHL match. No Olympics, no Worlds, no Four Nations. They barely perform for the Wings and don't need other distractions and coaches taking away from their time, effort, systems, and commitment. Now, pinch me if I'm dreaming, but I don't really think that NHL players like Lucas Raymond and Dylan Larkin would have straight up refused going to the Olympics if they were in a position to do so. This reply says, I think him and Larkin were worn out after the Olympics. Raymond doesn't need to participate in the losers tournament. Detroit's players are very valid and useful in these every single year. Let's leave this tournament for the Justin Abdelkaders. Okay, that's really funny. Another reply said, if Raymond has no injuries, how do you explain the last half of his season? Is he just not that good? And I think maybe some of the other comments said it best. Lucas Raymond was not a guy that was playing his best after the Olympic break. Maybe he was just totally worn out after that. Now, I get it. He is an $8 million NHL superstar who has produced 80-plus points in a season before. Maybe you don't have the right to say, oh, he just got worn out towards the end of the year. But he is still pretty young. There are growing pains to have when you're an NHL athlete. And for Lucas Raymond, you can say that maybe he is still reaching his prime, I guess. So the best could be yet to come for this guy. Who really knows? It's just apparent that that won't be on display at the World Championships this year, or at least it doesn't look like it's going to be on display, at least for now. He's uncertain. We'll see what happens. Marco Rossi, on the other hand, of the Vancouver Canucks, he is out. He had been spending most of the season injured, and that's a miracle, the fact that he was still able to produce. So I want you to let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. How do you feel about Rossi? How do you feel about Raymond and their absences, potential at the World Championships? I hope you enjoyed this video. And bye.